There is a breathing pattern so powerful that elite combat units once treated it like classified knowledge. Not meditation, not relaxation, a precise biological override hidden inside the most ordinary action your body performs thousands of times a day. Breathing. And here is the unsettling truth. For decades, instructors inside special operations training quietly taught a four-step breathing sequence capable of shutting down panic, stabilizing attention, and forcing the brain into peak performance within seconds. Why was something this simple never widely discussed? Because when you understand how breathing controls your nervous system, you realize something dangerous. The brain is far easier to hack than most people think. Right now, your nervous system is under silent siege, endless notifications, artificial light, constant pressure. Your brain interprets all of it as threat. The result is a nervous system stuck in survival mode. Your heart beats faster than necessary. Your attention fractures. Your amygdala, the primitive alarm center deep inside your brain, fires signals that keep your body tense and reactive. You think the problem is discipline. You think the problem is motivation. But the real problem sits inside your breath. Most people breathe in a chaotic rhythm that constantly feeds the stress circuitry of the brain. Short, shallow inhalations signal danger. Irregular exhalations keep the nervous system alert. The body becomes a machine locked in permanent readiness for threats that no longer exist. I have spent years studying the intersection between ancient breath rituals and modern neuroscience, and the evidence points to a shocking conclusion. Breathing is not just oxygen exchange. It is a command signal sent directly to the brain's control centers. Change the rhythm of the breath, and you change the electrical patterns of the brain itself. Elite military trainers discovered this under the harshest conditions imaginable, situations where panic meant failure and failure meant death. Under those conditions, a simple four-step breathing sequence emerged, a protocol capable of silencing the internal alarm system and restoring absolute cognitive control. And once you understand the mechanism behind it, you will never breathe the same way again. Now, here is where the story becomes even more unsettling, because the power of this breathing protocol does not come from relaxation or meditation. It comes from something far more precise. A hidden neurological switch buried deep inside your body, the vagus nerve. This single nerve is the longest communication cable in the human nervous system, running from your brainstem through your lungs, heart, and digestive organs like a biological fiber optic line transmitting commands between mind and body. Most people have never heard of it, yet it controls whether your brain operates in chaos or clarity. When the vagus nerve is inactive, the amygdala dominates. The brain scans constantly for threats, your heart rate rises, cortisol floods the bloodstream, and your focus fractures into fragments. But when the vagus nerve activates, an entirely different system takes control. The parasympathetic system, the biological state of calm precision used by elite performers, surgeons, snipers, and athletes operating under pressure. Breathing is the master key that unlocks this nerve. Each inhale and exhale sends mechanical signals through the lungs that stimulate receptors connected directly to the vagus nerve pathway. Think of the lungs like a control panel with hidden switches. Most people press random buttons all day through shallow breathing patterns, accidentally triggering stress responses over and over again. But when breathing becomes slow, deliberate, and rhythmically controlled, the vagus nerve begins to fire in a completely different pattern. The amygdala quiets. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for strategy, focus, and decision-making, suddenly regains command. It is like a chaotic battlefield suddenly receiving a clear signal from headquarters. This is exactly what military researchers began noticing during high-stress training environments. Recruits exposed to cold water immersion, sleep deprivation, and psychological pressure either collapsed into panic or entered a strange state of hyperclarity. The difference was not willpower, it was breathing rhythm. The trainees who instinctively slowed and structured their breath could stabilize their heart rate within seconds and maintain cognitive performance while others mentally shut down. Over time, instructors began formalizing the pattern these individuals used. 4 steps, simple, precise, and powerful enough to reset the electrical rhythm of the brain itself. Now we arrive at the moment most people never hear about, the actual protocol. The 4-step breathing sequence that allows you to take control of the brain's stress circuitry instead of being controlled by it. At first glance, it looks almost too simple, and that is exactly why many people dismiss it. But simplicity can hide extraordinary biological leverage. When executed correctly, this pattern forces the nervous system to shift gears in real time, overriding the amygdala and restoring command to the rational brain. I want you to approach this not as relaxation, but as a neurological sequence. Precision matters. Small details matter. This is not casual breathing. This is a controlled signal sent directly into your nervous system. Step 1 begins with the inhale, not a rushed breath, not a shallow chest movement. You inhale slowly through the nose for 4 seconds, allowing the diaphragm to descend and the lungs to expand fully. The stomach moves outward slightly, the ribs widen, and the air fills the lower part of the lungs where the highest concentration of oxygen exchange occurs. This single detail changes the signal traveling through the vagus nerve. Nasal breathing slows the airflow and stimulates receptors that tell the brain a different story. The environment is stable, the body is safe. Step 2 is where the neurological reset begins. After the inhale, you hold the breath for 4 seconds. This brief pause changes the oxygen and carbon dioxide balance in the bloodstream. Carbon dioxide rises slightly, and this is not a problem. In fact, it is the trigger. This mild increase sends a powerful signal to the brainstem, stabilizing neural firing patterns and forcing the body to slow down its emergency responses. Step 3 is the most important part, and the one most people rush. The exhale must last 6 seconds, longer than the inhale. As air leaves the lungs slowly, the vagus nerve fires strongly, sending a wave of calm signals toward the heart and brain. Heart rate begins to drop, tension releases from the muscles, and the internal alarm system loses its grip. Step 4 is the silent reset. After the exhale, you pause for 2 seconds before the next breath begins. This final moment creates a brief neurological gap, allowing the brain to settle into a new rhythm before the cycle repeats. The first time you run this sequence correctly, something unusual happens inside the body, and most people are not prepared for it. Within the first few cycles, your heart rate begins to shift. Not dramatically, not violently, but measurably. Sensors in the lungs and blood vessels detect the slower breathing rhythm and relay the message through the vagus nerve directly to the cardiac control centers of the brainstem. The heart responds almost immediately. Beats begin to space out. The chaotic rhythm of stress slowly reorganizes into something smoother, more efficient. This is the moment when the nervous system begins switching from survival mode to controlled performance mode. Many elite operators describe it as if internal noise suddenly drops in volume. Thoughts stop racing, vision sharpens, awareness becomes wider and calmer at the same time. What is actually happening here is electrical. Your brain normally operates in fast, scattered beta wave activity when stress dominates the nervous system. These high-frequency waves are useful for short bursts of attention, but under prolonged pressure, they become chaotic, fragmenting your focus and exhausting mental energy. The breathing protocol disrupts this pattern. As the exhale lengthens and the vagus nerve activates, neural circuits begin synchronizing into slower alpha wave rhythms. Alpha waves are the state of controlled alertness. Athletes experience it when they enter the zone. Musicians experience it when performance becomes effortless. Elite soldiers experience it when everything around them slows down just enough for clear decisions to emerge under pressure. At the same time, another transformation unfolds deep inside the emotional brain. The amygdala, that ancient threat detection system that normally floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol, begins to quiet. Imagine a fire alarm that has been screaming continuously, suddenly losing power. The signal weakens, the panic loop breaks. The prefrontal cortex regains access to resources that stress had locked away. Planning returns. Memory sharpens. Your brain shifts from reacting to thinking. And here is the extraordinary part. This shift does not require hours of meditation or years of training. In laboratory measurements, the first noticeable neurological change appears after only 3 to 5 cycles of controlled breathing, less than 1 minute. A biological reset triggered by nothing more than air moving through the lungs with deliberate rhythm. Most people experience the first effects of this breathing protocol within seconds. But the real transformation begins when the brain encounters the pattern repeatedly over time. The nervous system is not a static machine. It is adaptive, plastic, constantly rewiring itself based on the signals it receives most often. Every time you perform the 4-step breathing sequence, you are training your brain to recognize a new command pathway. At first, the effect feels temporary. You breathe, the mind calms, the heart slows. But after several days, something deeper begins to happen inside the neural architecture of the brain. Circuits associated with panic and impulsive reaction start losing dominance, while networks responsible for focus, emotional control, and strategic thinking strengthen their connections. Neuroscientists describe this process using a term that sounds technical but carries enormous meaning: neuroplasticity. The brain physically reshapes itself based on repeated experience. Controlled breathing becomes a form of neural conditioning. Studies examining slow rhythmic breathing show increased production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a molecule often called BDNF. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your neurons. It strengthens synaptic connections, improves learning speed, and helps stabilize neural networks responsible for attention and resilience under pressure. In practical terms, this means the brain becomes faster at entering the calm, focused state, triggered by the breathing protocol. What once required conscious effort begins happening automatically. The timeline of change is surprisingly clear. During the first session, most people notice immediate heart rate stabilization and a drop in mental noise within 60 seconds. After 1 week of consistent practice, the nervous system begins anticipating the breathing rhythm, allowing the calming response to activate almost instantly when the pattern begins. By the 30-day mark, the brain shows measurable improvements in stress tolerance and emotional regulation. Situations that once triggered anxiety now feel manageable. Decision-making becomes sharper because the prefrontal cortex is no longer constantly hijacked by fear signals from the amygdala. In other words, the breathing technique stops being a temporary trick and becomes a permanent neurological upgrade. The brain learns that control is possible, and once it learns that lesson, it begins choosing calm precision instead of automatic panic. Now you understand why something as simple as breathing was quietly preserved inside high-performance training environments for decades. It is not just a calming trick. It is a biological command sequence capable of overriding one of the oldest survival systems in the human brain. The same circuitry that once helped your ancestors detect predators now reacts to emails, deadlines, and endless digital stimulation. The modern world triggers ancient alarm systems that were never designed for constant activation. The result is a population living in permanent neurological tension, minds flooded with cortisol, attention fragmented, decision-making clouded by unconscious stress responses. Most people try to fight this with motivation, productivity systems, or stimulants. But those methods attack the symptoms while ignoring the control switch buried deep in the nervous system. The 4-step breathing protocol exposes that switch. Each slow inhale signals stability to the brainstem. Each controlled hold recalibrates the chemistry of the blood. Each extended exhale sends a wave of vagus nerve activation that quiets the amygdala and stabilizes heart rhythm. Within a few cycles, the body remembers something it has forgotten in the modern world: how to operate without fear dominating every signal. This is why elite performers return to the breath before critical moments. Snipers steady their breathing before pulling the trigger. Surgeons regulate their breathing before making the first incision. High-level athletes slow their breathing just before the decisive movement that determines victory or failure. They are not calming themselves by accident. They are deliberately placing the brain into a neurological state where precision becomes possible. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Knowledge alone changes nothing. Most people will hear this protocol once, maybe try it for a minute, then return to the chaotic breathing patterns that keep their nervous system trapped in stress. The challenge is simple. For the next 30 days, run this 4-step breathing sequence every morning and every time stress begins rising. Treat it like a mental weapon, a reset switch for your biology. Because once you train your brain to obey your breath, something remarkable happens. Panic loses its authority, focus sharpens, and the mind that once reacted automatically begins operating with deliberate control.